My wife cheated on me with her boss, and now she's trying to steal our $350, $0 house and $200, $0 in savings in a messy divorce filled with lies, hidden accounts, and a plot to sue me for custody while secretly planning to leave town with the kids. I feel like I've lost everything. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about betrayal like this, but here I am. Honestly, the whole thing feels like a bad movie, except it's my life and it's anything but scripted. The most shocking part, it all unraveled in a matter of days, starting with a gut feeling I couldn't shake and ending with me discovering that my wife, Emily, had been cheating on me with her boss, Jason. Yeah, Jason, the guy she used to complain about because he was such a creep. But turns out, she was into him behind my back. It's like I was living with a stranger the entire time, and I didn't see it coming. We've been married for 8 years, and honestly, I thought we had a pretty decent life. I work hard as a project manager at a construction firm, and Emily's been a stay-at-home mom for the last 3 years, taking care of our two kids, Lily and Max. We live in a beautiful house, worth about $350, $0, and we've got around $200, $0 in savings, which I thought was our safety net, especially with Emily not working. We had a routine, a rhythm. She'd get the kids ready in the mornings, I'd come home in the evenings, we'd eat dinner, watch TV, and go to bed. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Until about 2 months ago, I started noticing small things. Emily's phone was always locked, which was weird because she's not the secretive type. She'd get defensive if I asked to see it, saying she was just tired of me snooping. Then, I noticed her disappearing for long stretches during the day. She'd say she was running errands or meeting friends, but her stories never quite added up. She'd get defensive, snap at me if I asked questions, and I caught her lying a couple of times about where she was. Nothing concrete, just enough to make me suspicious. The real turning point came when I found a pair of women's earrings in her car, stuff she swore she didn't own. She said they were her friend Jessica's and she'd borrowed them once. I knew she was lying. Jessica is her friend, but she doesn't wear earrings like that, and Jessica would have told me if she'd given her jewelry. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But then I saw her phone one night, left on the kitchen table, and I noticed a string of texts between her and Jason. Just casual at first, then more suggestive. The tone was flirty, and I saw a message where she told him she was looking forward to seeing him tonight. That's when everything hit me like a freight train. I was stunned. My stomach sank and I felt this terrible mix of anger and betrayal. How could she do this? After everything we've been through. I kept the phone, took screenshots, and just sat there processing what I'd found. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I mean, I knew Emily had a sharp tongue, but I never thought she'd be capable of lying like this, lying to my face, hiding a whole other life. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The house, the kids, our savings, everything suddenly looked like it was hanging by a thread. And the worst part, I had no idea how deep this thing went. That night, I confronted her. I didn't want to, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I called her into the living room, showed her the messages. Her face went pale and she tried to deny it at first, said it was all a mistake, that Jason was just a business acquaintance and that I was overreacting. She said she never meant for me to find out like this, that she loved me, that she was just stressed and made a stupid mistake. But the texts, they told a different story. She was clearly lying, trying to spin it into some kind of innocent flirtation. But I knew better. I saw the way she looked away, the way she fidgeted. She was caught. I felt a mix of rage and sadness. That's when the real realization sank in. I had been a fool. I had trusted her, built my life around her, and she had been sneaking around with her boss, Jason, for who knows how long. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how. I didn't see it coming. It was like my whole world was crashing down and I was helpless to stop it. I looked at her and all I could think was, how could she do this to us? To me, to the kids. I was furious, but I also felt broken inside. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just a fling or some one-time thing. It was betrayal on a scale I never expected. And I knew one thing for sure, things would never go back to how they were. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing over everything I'd uncovered. The house suddenly felt too quiet, too empty even when Emily was right there. I kept replaying her lies, her dismissals, the way she tried to brush it off like it was nothing. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the panic, the way she was desperately trying to hide something that was now staring me right in the face. The next morning, I decided I had to dig deeper. I wasn't just going to confront her and hope she'd come clean. No, I needed hard evidence. I started with her phone, going through her messages more thoroughly. I found more than I expected: secret emails, clandestine texts, even a few explicit photos. Things got worse. It wasn't just a one-night stand. She had been seeing Jason for months, maybe longer. She'd been lying about her schedule, about her whereabouts. She'd been sneaking around with the boss, and I was just discovering how deep the rabbit hole went. I also found out that Emily had opened a secret bank account, one I didn't know about. She'd been funneling money into it, probably to hide her escapades. The account had about $50, $0 in it. I was furious. How could she be so calculating, so dishonest? It was clear she was planning something, and I had to get ahead of her. I started calling lawyers, trying to understand my rights and what I could do to protect our assets. The house, the savings. She was already scheming to take as much as possible. I felt like I was fighting a battle I didn't even know I was in. Meanwhile, Emily was still pretending everything was fine. She'd put on the act of being the perfect wife, but I could see the cracks. She'd get snippy if I mentioned anything about her behavior, and she started throwing out accusations, saying I was paranoid, that I was overreacting, that I was ruining the family. The more she tried to gaslight me, the more I realized she was trying to spin the story in her favor. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew she was lying, and I had the evidence to prove it. One day, I caught her in another lie. She had told me she was going to be at a book club with her friends. But I tracked her location through her phone, and she was actually with Jason. I saw them together at a local hotel, heard Jason and a bunch of texts from her saying how excited she was to see him. That was the final straw. I was done pretending. I couldn't keep living in this fog of betrayal. It was time to face facts. She was gone, emotionally and physically. She had already checked out, and I was just a pawn in her game. I decided I had to do something drastic. I couldn't let her take everything: our house, our savings, the kids' future. I contacted a lawyer that day, prepared for the worst. I knew she'd try to take everything in the divorce, especially with her sneaky accounts and her lies about her finances. I also started planning how I'd approach the kids. I didn't want to scare them, but I knew they sensed something was wrong. I had to be careful, but I also had to be firm. I wasn't going to let her steal our life away without a fight. The emotional toll was enormous. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so much anger I wasn't sure what to do with it. I'd always been the stable one, the guy who kept everything together, and now I felt like I was falling apart. I kept asking myself how Emily could do this to us, how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could turn our lives into this mess. I was hurt, yes, but also determined. I knew I had to be smart, strategic, and ready for whatever came next. Because if she thought she could just walk away with our house, our savings, and the kids, she was dead wrong. I wasn't going down without a fight. In the days that followed, I threw myself into gathering everything I could to protect what was left of my life. I pulled bank statements, saved every email, screenshotting her secret accounts and hidden messages. I even hired a private investigator just to confirm what I already knew: she was planning to leave town with the kids. I had to be prepared for her next move. Emily had always been manipulative, and I knew she'd try to spin this to her advantage, maybe even try to accuse me of abuse or neglect just to get custody. Meanwhile, she kept up the act of being the perfect wife. She'd come home pretending to be exhausted from running errands, but her eyes would dart around, avoiding mine. She'd cook dinner, smile politely, and then go back to her phone the moment the kids were in bed. It was like living with a stranger, someone who was pretending everything was fine but was secretly planning her escape. I could see her doing her best to make me doubt myself, to turn the situation around so she'd look like the victim. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. One night, I decided I needed to confront her directly. I sat her down in the Living room, the tension thick in the air. I laid out all the evidence, her secret emails, her bank account, the hotel receipts, the texts from Jason. I told her I knew she was planning to take the kids and run, that I wasn't going to let her do that without a fight. She looked stunned at first, then angry, then defensive. She started with her typical lies, claiming I was paranoid, accusing me of spying on her, saying she was just trying to find herself after years of being stuck at home. She denied everything, even the most obvious signs. Said she'd never cheated, that Jason was just a colleague, and that I was overreacting. She called me crazy, said I was ruining our marriage, but I knew better. I had the proof. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I was going to fight for custody, because I knew she was planning to leave with the kids and take our house and savings. Her face twisted with rage, and she started yelling, accusing me of trying to ruin her life, of being controlling, of not trusting her. It was like watching a different person emerge. Bitchy, manipulative, totally unhinged. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing me. I realized I'd never been so blindsided in my life. I thought I knew her, but she'd been hiding this entire side of herself. I felt stupid for trusting her, for building a life based on lies. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. She'd already taken enough. I was determined to fight for my rights, for my kids, for what was left of my sanity. The next morning I met with the lawyer. We discussed the divorce process, my rights to the house, the savings, and custody. I told him about her plans to leave town, and he warned me to be prepared for her to try to hide assets or manipulate the situation. I also decided to start recording every interaction, every conversation, just in case I'd need proof later. I knew Emily was a liar, and I had to cover my ass. I also reached out to friends and family, not to badmouth her but to get emotional support. Some of them knew she'd been acting strange lately, but none suspected the full extent of her lies. It was a lonely feeling, like I was fighting this battle alone, even with her right there in the house. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious, all at once. I'd always been the dependable guy, the one everyone counts on, and now I was stuck in this nightmare where everything I believed in was crumbling. But I promised myself I wouldn't give up. I'd do whatever it took to protect my kids and my future, even if it meant tearing apart the life I thought I knew. Over the next few weeks, everything escalated quickly. Emily's behavior became more erratic. She was tense, snapping at the kids and trying to keep her phone hidden whenever I was around. I knew she was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what. I kept digging into her secret accounts, monitoring her movements, and gathering as much evidence as I could. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong move, and she might try to run with the kids or destroy what little stability I had left. One afternoon, I caught her on her phone again. This time, I managed to sneak a peek over her shoulder and saw a flurry of messages between her and Jason. They were planning a getaway, talking about a weekend trip to a beach house she'd never mentioned before. The messages were full of flirtatious innuendos, plans to sneak out, and even logistical details about how to avoid my suspicion. That was the final confirmation I needed. She was actively plotting to take the kids and run. I felt my stomach twist with anger. I had to act fast. I called my lawyer immediately, and we drafted a temporary custody order. I also contacted the private investigator again, this time to confirm her plans. Sure enough, Emily was planning to leave town with the kids in 2 weeks, using some fake story about visiting relatives out of state. She'd even been secretly packing and hiding bags. I was furious but also terrified. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was an attempt to steal my children and everything we'd built. That night I sat her down again. I told her I knew what she was planning, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I told her I was filing for full custody and that she'd be lucky if she saw the kids at all, considering her lies and manipulations. She got defensive, crying, saying I was ruining everything, that I was paranoid and controlling. She said she loved the kids and would never hurt them. But I could see through her tears. She was panicked, desperate, trying to spin her lies into some kind of victimhood. She started accusing me of being paranoid, of trying to control her, of sabotaging her life. She yelled at me, calling me a jealous, insecure husband. Honestly, I was too angry to respond. I just sat there, listening to her scream, knowing that everything I'd uncovered proved she was lying. I told her that I'd do everything in my power to keep my kids safe and that I was going to fight her in court. I could see the realization in her eyes. She knew she was losing control. She tried to threaten me, saying she'd leave town with the kids anyway, that I'd regret this, but I didn't care anymore. I'd already made up my mind. She was not taking my kids, not without a fight. The next day, I filed for divorce and custody. The documents were detailed, including all the evidence of her affair, her secret accounts, her plans to leave with the kids. I also made a move to freeze our assets temporarily, just enough to prevent her from draining the savings or hiding anything else. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, so I had to be proactive. I also started documenting every interaction, every lie, every suspicious move she made. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, angry, exhausted. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all the signs, how I hadn't seen her slip away from me. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold and manipulative. I was heartbroken for the life we'd lost, but I also knew I had to stay strong, for the kids, for myself. I couldn't let her steal them away just because she wanted a new life with Jason, or because she was too selfish to think about the damage she was doing. I made a silent vow that I'd do whatever it took to protect my family, even if it meant fighting dirty or going to war in court. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting to keep my children safe from a mother who was willing to lie, cheat, and plot her way out of our life together. The court hearings came faster than I expected. Emily was already spinning her lies, trying to paint herself as the victim. She claimed I was controlling, that I was paranoid and abusive, trying to keep her from finding herself. Her words felt like knives. She was good at twisting the truth, making it seem like she was the one suffering. But I had the evidence. All the texts, the secret accounts, the hotel receipts. I handed everything over to my lawyer and we prepared for the fight of our lives. During the custody hearings, Emily's demeanor shifted. She tried to guilt the judge, crying fake tears and claiming she was just a victim of my paranoia. She accused me of being emotionally unstable, trying to turn the court against me. But I stayed calm, sticking strictly to the facts, proof of her affair, her plans to leave with the kids, her financial deception. I knew I had to be strategic. I wasn't just fighting for custody, I was fighting to prevent her from taking the house and our savings. The judge saw through her act pretty quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. I had documentation of her secret accounts, the hotel stay, the plans to leave town. I had witnesses who could testify about her controlling behavior, her lies, and her attempts to manipulate the situation. It was clear she was trying to run away with the kids and the money to start fresh somewhere else. The court awarded me temporary custody, and Emily was ordered to stay in town and stay away from the kids until the final decision. That didn't stop her from trying to sabotage everything. She started filing motions, claiming I was unfit, trying to get full custody herself. She hired her own lawyer, and I could see her desperation creeping in. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly to keep everything organized, making sure I had all the evidence to prove her intentions and her lies. I also started secretly recording some of our conversations, just in case she tried to lie under oath. It was uncomfortable, but I knew I had to do whatever it took to protect my kids. Emotionally, it was a roller coaster. I felt like I was losing my mind some days, exhausted from the constant battles. I was angry at Emily, furious that she'd betrayed me, lied to our family, and planned to steal our future. I was also deeply hurt. How could she do this to her own children? To me? The woman I loved had become a stranger, someone capable of deception and betrayal on such a scale. I felt betrayed, but I also knew I had to stay strong, not just for myself but for my kids. They deserved stability, and I was determined to give them that, even if their mother was trying to take them away. In the quiet moments, I reflected on everything I'd lost: trust, security, the life we built. I wondered how I'd ended up here, fighting just to keep my family intact. But I also learned something important. Betrayal reveals people's true colors. Emily's true nature had come out in the worst way, and I realized I had to cut ties with her completely to protect what was left. I started making plans for the future, buying time, saving more money, preparing for the final court date. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I also knew I couldn't give up. I'd fought for my family, for my kids, and I was going to keep fighting until I had nothing left to give. Because in the end, I owed it to them and to myself to see this through. The final court date came sooner than I expected, and I felt like I'd been through an emotional war. Emily showed up, still trying to spin her lies, but I was ready. Every piece of evidence I had gathered, texts, bank statements, hotel receipts, witness testimonies, was laid out clearly. I looked her in the eyes and saw the desperation, the panic, the guilt. She knew she was losing, and I could tell she realized her carefully constructed lies were crumbling. The judge listened carefully to both sides, reviewing all the evidence. When it was my turn, I laid out everything. How she'd been planning to leave with the kids, how she'd been secretly draining our savings, and her affair with Jason. I explained how her actions were putting our children at risk, how she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. I could see her trying to interrupt, trying to deny everything, but it was useless. The proof was irrefutable. In the end, the judge awarded me full custody of Lily and Max. He also ordered Emily to stay in town, prohibited her from contacting the kids without supervision, and froze her access to our joint accounts. The house, which I'd fought so hard to keep, remained mine, and the court ordered her to pay child support, but her attempt to drain our savings was thwarted. She looked defeated, furious, and humiliated. Her carefully crafted lies had been exposed for everyone to see. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The nightmare wasn't over, but I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming my life. I knew I'd need time to heal, to rebuild trust in myself and in what was left of my future. But I also knew one thing: I'd survived. I'd fought for my children, for my dignity, and for the truth. No matter how much she tried to manipulate or lie her way out, I had the evidence, the support, and the resolve to move forward. Looking back, I realize how much I learned from this ordeal. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. Emily's selfishness, her manipulations, her lies, they all showed her true colors. I learned that trust is fragile, and sometimes you have to fight hard just to hold on to what's rightfully yours. I've come out of this stronger, more cautious, and with a clearer understanding of what I need: integrity, honesty, and respect. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows they're not alone, and that even in the darkest moments, there's a way to stand tall and fight for what matters most. Because in the end, standing up for yourself and your family is the bravest thing you can do.